Yo, what's up, guys? We are live. So we have a dope podcast slash interview for you today. We got Mr. Anti.Prophet joining us. So how would you characterize your channel?
That's a good question. So I think when I first started things off, I was just kind of doing just sort of middle of the road motivation stuff. But I think as time went on, and as you kind of find your voice as a content creator, I ended up going in the direction of creating content that uh, played a bit of devil's advocate to both sides of the political aisle, and in terms of like both sides of even like the dating aisle. So I'm kind of going in there, subverting people's sacred cow beliefs, not for the purpose of necessarily changing their minds, but to give them an opportunity to articulate why it is that they feel the way that they do, in order for people to better understand why it is they believe what it is they do.
Yeah, the first video of yours I saw was when you were talking about how the problem with self-improvement is that you just wind up watching a lot of videos, you get that dopamine high, but then you don't actually go do anything. And what you should be doing instead is actually going out and doing stuff, which is a pretty common sense message, but I think it's an important one. So that was the first time I saw your content. I was like, all right, this guy's onto something. So let's start off with this question. I think this is something everyone's curious about. So why the mask?
That's a good question. So to begin with, the mask was really for the purpose of anonymity. I work in social media, and the guy that I was working for as a COO has 4 million followers online. And I needed to be anonymous because I couldn't represent his brand in this way. So I think as time went on, though, I was trying to find a mask, there were a lot of different options. And I think I went with this one because I wanted people to see my content and not necessarily see me in the content. I wanted them to see themselves. And I think once I kind of saw this particular mask, just sort of the whiteness, the blankness of it, looked more like a mirror than it did anything.
Do you ever plan on doing a face reveal? Like when you get to 1 million subs or something? I know a lot of Jesus did that. He was anonymous until he hit 1 million.
Yeah, a lot of people have been asking me that. I think I'm probably going to keep it anonymous for as long as I can.
Okay. It could be a good way to drive up subs. Like, hey, listen, you guys want to see my face? You guys subscribe to the channel. So here's the second question. How did you come up with the name Anti.Prophet? Like, why do you call yourself Anti.Prophet?
Yeah, so that was very much a result of just the subconscious sort of at play. I didn't really know why I was, kind of starting with that. It just kind of felt right at the beginning. But again, I think as time went on, the reasoning for it seemed to be that I didn't really want to get on here and necessarily be anyone's guru. I think that, we all have the ability to solve our own problems if we don't look to the outside world and we instead look within. So, if I can be a conduit for people to start looking within, that's great. But like, as far as the information or the opinions that I'm sharing, I mean, I'm wanting you guys to kind of look within rather than to look to me in terms of what I say. So I think that's kind of why I ended up going with keeping Anti.Prophet.
Yeah, it's like a little bit of a catch-22 because I hear what you're saying, but like people are coming to our channels to watch our content, to learn from us, but then we want them to look within. So yeah, where would you say? So I know you talk about politics. I think you've talked a good amount about how the West is fucked, right? That's a big part of your channel. And in terms of dating, would you identify with any community like pickup, red pill, black pill, purple pill, whatever fucking pill?
Sure. Yeah. So let me give a bit of context, and I won't let this draw out for too long. But I spent quite a bit of time in the pickup artist community, and a little bit of time in the red pill community, and even like a tiny bit of time, and I mean like tiny bit. I mean like 1 week in the MGTOW community.
Okay.
So all of that was kind of a result of my ex-marriage, which kind of fell apart in 2020, and I think. Everything just sort of fell apart, lost my marriage, had to end a friendship with my best man at my wedding. Dad died, lost my house, had to get rid of my dog, and lost my job, all within, a very, very small span of time. And especially with marriage, I was kind of like completely confused because, I had worked really hard to be like a good husband, a good boyfriend. And I was kind of looking for answers. And I think, something that the red pill community sort of offered a branch to grab onto and climb up with was the idea that, there are certain dynamics between men and women that at the very least can be counted upon in like 80-90% of situations. And obviously there are outliers, there are exceptions to every rule, but I think one of the biggest things that I got out of any of those communities was that being nice and rolling over whenever you're kind of confronted with conflict in your relationship is not something that is going to lead to longevity if you're looking for a strong partnership with a strong partner. So I originally started with pickup artists, moved to Red Pill, and I think as time went on, I began to identify less and less with these communities, just because I don't know, the people that I see stay in these communities for too long of a period of time becomes dogma, and it becomes just a bit strange.
Yeah, I somewhat agree with that. So would you say it was the lack of boundaries that was the main issue in the marriage? Like now that you're reflecting about it, what do you think was the reason that the marriage went sour?
Well, yeah, I mean, it certainly was the lack of boundaries. So, in that marriage, I was dealing with like physical abuse, even a certain
Oh,
level of sexual abuse, and like verbal abuse. Like it was horrid, and I let it go on for 4.5 years. And I think you get to the end of that situation, and if you're, trying to be self-reflective and trying to fix your own life, I mean, you can either come out of that situation thinking to yourself, "Oh, that person's just a horrible person," like, fuck them, basically, or you can kind of turn it around on yourself without being too overly critical. But the question you can ask yourself is, why did I let this go on for as long as I did? And the moment that you start kind of asking yourself that question is the moment that you start to actually consider like what values and what boundaries you have for yourself. And just throughout that entire relationship, I had no boundaries, and that was something that I had to contend with for sure.
yeah, that can definitely be a big issue because the girl just
Mhm.
loses respect for you, and then she starts testing and testing. Do
Yeah.
you think, like, knowing what you know now, you could have made it work with that girl, or was it a lost cause from the beginning?
Lost cause from the beginning. This was the kind of thing where, in terms of if I saw the world back then in the way that I see it now, I would have gotten to the third date and been like, you're a really nice person. It's just this isn't the vibe for me. I mean, our third date, she was 10 shots of vodka in, took me back to her place, and I had just barely met her, but she was like basically trying to get me to fuck her or whatever, and I was like, look, I don't know you, I don't want to get like fucking canceled, and she just like went off on me.
Wait,
Was just like, hey,
canceled for fucking her? Like, you mean she wanted to make a porno? Is that what you're saying? Or
no, 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 no. So it's just like I didn't know this person, and she was like just blackout drunk, and she was like
oh, I
trying to get me
see.
to sleep with her, and I was like, look, I I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah,
you, like I don't, again, I don't want to get canceled.
yeah, yeah. No, I
If
get.
you wake up in the morning and don't want to do it. So
It.
again, it's just like if I was in that situation now, I'd be like, hey, like you're a nice person, but I think we should probably continue forward as friends or nothing at all. So
Yeah, I would just walk away, man. Alcoholism, yeah, like alcoholism and hardcore drug use. That's yeah, that's a tough one. I
yeah.
yeah, a little bit of drinking is cool, a little bit of drug use is cool, but too much, 10 shots, yeah, especially like on a date, I feel like it's a little bit more inappropriate because you don't really know that person. Like if you get drunk with your
Mhm.
friends, I think it's a little different. I mean, at least it wasn't the first date. What were some other red flags that you saw?
Um, from hip to knee on both of her legs, it was just her entire legs were just scars. So
Oh,
she was a really really intense self harmer, basically from the age
oh,
of 13 to 24. And when I say covered in scars, this isn't just like you know a few scars. It's like it kind of looked like she was a burn victim.
wow.
And originally, and even to this day, it was like seeing those scars all in a way sort of upped the amount of respect that I had for her, just because she kind of came from a very specific, really just horrible, horrible past. And the fact that she was, in her late 20s or, early 30s and not dead in a ditch was phenomenal. I mean, like props to her. But again, it's just like someone can be amazing in one way and also like just really, really challenging in another way, especially with relationships. So I'd say that was another red flag. The drug use was also a big issue, and the inability to deal with conflict in a way that was calm, mature. Like I can deal with a fight with my girlfriend now and have it go off the rails, but like everything remains respectful at the
Right,
very least,
right.
and that's really important to me. And that was just something that wasn't a possibility then.
Yeah, I feel like if a girl, like if I'm in a relationship right now, we're going on 3 years, but if my girlfriend ever like personally insulted me or
Yeah.
like or anything physical at all, that would be the end of that relationship. And I think it would be the same way for her if I did that to her. I think she would walk away
Mm.
too. Yeah, like we get into arguments, but our arguments are like us talking on the phone for 3 hours and just being very like deep conversations. I don't think I've ever even yelled at a girl, at least not a girl that I was dating. I mean, yeah, I feel like people think that arguments need to be like yelling and all this crazy shit, but it could just be like if you I think if you're more evolved or more mature, the way you would do, like, hey, listen, this is what you did, and this made me feel like this, and
Yeah.
this is why I'm upset about it. And then she tells you her side of the story. You're like, well, okay, I understand what you're saying, but, and then that's like a much healthier way to have a discussion or a fight than like,
Yeah.
fuck you dumb bitch.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think to my ex-wife's credit, that was something that I struggled with back in the day as well. It's not necessarily that I was yelling. That was very much not my style. My style was basically just like fawning in order to get through the fight as quick as possible and sort of concede on things that I should not have
Yeah.
conceded on. But then that only is that's only a viable solution for so long, because like at a certain point after months or years, then you blow up and you become the one that starts yelling. I've never been one to call anyone any names necessarily, but yeah, if you let that kind of behavior go on for too long, then you become volatile. So again, to her credit, it's just I allowed a certain kind of behavior to go on for too long, and then I ended up mirroring a lot of the things that I would now criticize in that relationship. So
Yeah, I mean, I guess everyone has a learning experience. I feel like
mhm.
one of the most attractive, tell me if you agree or disagree with this, one of the most, not attractive, one of the most essential qualities for a relationship is the ability and willingness to walk away if your boundaries are crossed
Yeah,
sufficient. Doesn't mean you leave like every time you get into a fight, but like you have like your non negotiable boundaries. And if those are crossed, you will walk away. And I think a lot of guys are not willing to do that. They'll just put up with anything and everything until it gets to such a point, right? So it starts off with like somewhat small things, and then just builds up until it gets to a point where it's like something crazy, where she like fucking kills your dog or like whatever,
yeah.
bangs your friend, and then you're like, okay, I have to walk away from this one. But yeah, but it never starts big. It always typically starts a little bit on the smaller side and builds up. Would you agree with
Well,
that?
yeah, definitely. And on top of that, I would add attractive and necessary. I would actually use both of the adjectives that you used at the beginning. But yeah, people aren't stupid. I mean, if a woman or a man are really kind of testing boundaries, no one's going to go from 0 to 100 unless they just like have zero control.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, the relationship isn't going to work, because most people can be like, okay, I'm fucking done with that. But people want to see how much they can get away with. And the longer you let that go on, the longer the harder it's going to be to walk people back from the real line in the sand that you have. So I think going into a relationship, you really got to know what your hard boundaries are, in order to make it work. Because if you don't, you'll get trumped, and it'll happen over a long period of time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let me ask you one more question on this. I
Mhm.
hope you don't mind. It's a little bit of a personal question, but
Sure.
I just kind of stood out. You said sexual abuse. How does that work? It like if you're the guy, like I'm just trying
Yeah,
to know
yeah.
what that be.
So here's the thing. This story is actually kind of funny. I'm very much able to laugh about it at this point. But back when we were kind of first dating, again, I was a young guy at the time. I was 23, and she was a few years older than me, and she'd been in the BDSM scene for
Mhm.
a number of years. And I've done a lot of BDSM at this point, sort of as a result of that relationship, but also some stuff outside of it. But we went into like that scene or whatever, right?
Mhm.
And she wanted to try like being dom. And again, this was like actually my first experience with any of this. So she was quite drunk, I was quite high, uh and she was using a horsewhip or whatever. And I think the shtick was something like, okay, we're gonna go to 10, and every time you get a hit you count. So we were going through, I get to 4, I say 4, and for whatever reason, she doesn't hear me. And like, she like hits me again. And I'm like, what the fuck? I said 4. So we get to the end of it. And just because I'm so fucking blazed, I'm like really upset for like 45 minutes or whatever. And, kind of throughout that, she's like holding me or like whatever. And then I get to the end of that and I'm like, God, that was fucking terrible. And then she like goes off, like she really, really fucking loses it. And then it was just a weird dynamic from then on out with BDSM, literally over the next 4 years. So the reason I say sexual abuse is not because like it like fucking traumatized me or whatever, because in retrospect, it's a hilarious story. It's just like if I was doing a scene with someone and I was being the dom and like we got to the end of the scene and I treated them in the way that that like she treated me in that particular scene, it would be the kind of thing where like I would, especially if it was in like a group munch or whatever, like I would never be invited back to the BDSM community if I were to treat someone in that way at the end. Like they're just hard
Yeah.
rules that you don't fucking play with. That's one of them.
Yeah, there's definitely a massive double standard. I don't know if you know. Do you know who Joey Salads is?
I've heard of the name. This may have, I think I watched his stuff maybe back in 2020. So it's been a while, but I think I know who this
He
is.
did a pretty interesting experiment. So he did the first experiment was him like not actually hitting the girl, but like getting ready to hit the girl, right? It
Mhm.
was all like acted, right? In public. And like every time people came in, like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You never hit a woman. And the second thing was the polar opposite, where the woman was the one. And like most of the time people were just laughing, saying like, aha, control your woman. Like so it was like the double reaction was insane. Oh, I think what it was she was saying, "Hey, I want you to sleep with me," and he was like, "Hey, listen, I'm really not in the mood." She was being like super pushy, right?
Mhm.
People are like, "Come on, stop being a pussy." But when it was the opposite, it's like, "Hey, well, I'm gonna fuck you tonight." She's like, "No, I really can't. My vagina hurts." No, you're gonna get it. People are like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Don't be rapey." So yeah, I mean, you know, some of it kind of makes sense, obviously, because we men are a lot stronger than women. But yeah, there's definitely this double standard. One thing I've observed is like pretty much every girl I've ever dated, the one thing that I feel like they always try to test me on is like fucking ass shit like, oh babe, come on, let me just lick your asshole. I'm like, no, not my thing. But maybe just one finger. I'm like, no. But just let me just get close to it. I'm like, nope, don't even get close to it. But just I don't know
That's
why. It
hilarious.
seems to be the common pattern amongst women.
You
Um,
know, it's funny. I've never been in the situation, and I've been with some people who are into some really nasty shit, but for whatever reason, no one has ever wanted to touch my ass. For which I am extraordinarily grateful because I would probably be very similar to you. Would be like, no, this is get the fuck away from me.
maybe it's a Miami thing. Okay,
Could
so
be.
I want to circle back to what you were saying about the various communities you're in. So, what were the good and bad things you learned in each community? Let's start off with pickup, and then let's go to Red Pill, and let's go to MGTOW.
Sure. So I would say with pickup, I really just kind of learned how to talk to women. I mean, again, just being in a place where you're just absolutely devastated, you lose like your entire like livelihood. I needed some sort of pick me up, and you know, without the pickup information that I eventually ended up getting, I you know me going and starting up conversations with women just looked like complete buffoonery. So just the practicals of just like starting a conversation, remaining interesting throughout, like that's what I'd say I got out of pickup. Out of red pill, I think the main thing that I got out of that was just embracing, you know, some of the stereotypes that come along with the differences between men and women, emotional versus logic. I think even in terms of like how someone like the purpose behind male communication versus the purpose behind female communication for men, it's to convey information, and the purpose behind female communication is really to get the person listening to them to feel the way that they're feeling, instead of to just like convey raw information. I think you know the idea of hypergamy is something that I don't really hold to that necessarily as a hard and fast rule because well, honestly, I'm not entirely sure why, but yeah, the at least stereotype of it was something that was very useful to me and encouraged me to kind of get my shit together because you know when I was coming out of this marriage, I was a professional violinist, really solid violinist. Not to toot my own horn, but you know, violinists don't make a lot of money. So even the idea of hypergamy and like getting out, becoming best version of myself was useful. And then to get to MGTOW, I think MGTOW really the only interesting piece of food for thought was likely the idea that like marriage screws men over more than it does women in the event that it ends. Though at this point, I still am a big believer in marriage, and I think there's a responsible way to do it legally, and going into it and making sure that you really trust the person. Again, I have a lot of experience of choosing the wrong person, so uh, you know, theoretically that should play in my favor to some degree. But I think that's probably the main thing that I took away from that, just the usefulness of being cautious with a situation like that.
Yeah, my take on hypergamy is that it applies to both men and women. I think both men
Mm.
and women want to trade up. Like that's why you see like the boss leaving his wife of 20 years and the mother of his kids for like some young hot secretary, right? So I think it happens in both genders. But I think that some people are much more hypergamous than others. So like for example, like a woman who or a man, this can apply to anyone who's like very has good qualities and is very loyal. She might ignore the temptation to trade up, but she might still have a little bit of the temptation if she sees like a guy who's like really successful, really her type, but she will ignore that temptation. Versus some girls, they'll just like give into that temptation every time. So there's like, I don't like the idea of like putting like a blank label like women hypergamous, right? Because first of all, men
Sure.
are hypergamous too, and there's like such different levels of it, right? Everyone wants to do better in their life. Like we kind of evolved to want better, right? Like no one, humans wouldn't be here if we didn't want better in our life. It's just like to what extent and do you act on it? Kind of like cheating, right? Like every guy in a
Yeah.
relationship gets tempted to cheat, but that doesn't mean you have to actually fuck the girl. Some guys act on it, some guys don't, right? So that's kind of how I've always looked at it. So what were like what would you say are some of the things that you disliked about each one of those communities?
Um, Honestly, I think the more pickup content that I consume, just the more cringe it got. And I say that kind of lovingly, just because I think some of the best content that's ever been created on the internet is pickup artist content. It's really entertaining and it's informative. And if you're outside of the community, it is a bit cringe. But I think the other main thing that I got out of oh, shit, I had such a good answer. What was it? Uh, the question was, what did I get out of pickup? What did I get out of
Yeah,
Reddit?
well,
Correct.
that was the first question, but the second question was, what are the things that you dislike most about each community? So you're saying in the pickup community, there's a lot of cringe, which actually makes me curious. Like, what were the channels you were watching that you thought were really cringy?
John Anthony lifestyle. Yeah, even a bit of I mean, even to a certain extent, I think Fresh and Fit is somewhat pickup artisty. Honestly, dude, I have to give you proper props. Again, I was watching you back in 2020, which is funny that I'm being asked
Oh,
on this
okay.
podcast now,
Cool.
just because everything's a circle, right? Everything comes back around. But one of the earliest videos that I saw in terms of sexual escalation is your video regarding like how to sexually escalate with a girl like at your apartment or whatever. It has like I think now it has 4.5 million views or something like that. But
Yeah.
like, I fucking love that video. Like that is like pioneer pickup artists like content
Mm.
on the internet. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think I watched it at this point and I'm like, oh man, this is a lot to watch. But like it like even though like while I was watching it back in 2020, there was a bit of me being like, oh my God, I can't even watch this. Like ultimately it was useful. Like it legit was useful. You watch it and because again, you have to understand like where I was coming from. I was coming from like this guy who didn't know how to be with anyone except for his ex-wife, and before that, be with the ex-girlfriend that he had for 5 years. What the fuck did I know about like escalating in a situation? So watching shit like that, it was very useful. But again, I'm getting off of the main point. I think with the pickup artist community, I think the biggest thing, and I'll say this as a blanket statement because I know I'm sort of rambling at this point, but as a blanket statement, my biggest issue with all of these communities was that I got to a point where I was consuming so much content and not doing anything with the
Mm.
content.
Mm.
And I think a lot of these guys set up their brands in such a way where it becomes, sort of, pumping a certain level of ideology to their fans so that they sort of hyper fixate on the theory behind everything without actually going out into the world and doing something
Mhm.
with the theory. I think you can get, the quick little nuggets from each of these communities within maybe a day or two of consuming the content. And then go out into the world and like take some action. But I think after that, you just kind of, you get hyper fixated on not doing anything and instead criticizing XYZ community because you're not getting what you want. That's sort of been my experience.
Yeah, you said a lot of interesting things. Definitely. So speaking of that video, we call it the Carla video because that was the chick's name.
Yeah,
I
hell yeah.
almost didn't release that video, believe it or not. I thought that video when I
Oh,
first shot it, I thought it was cringe. Honestly, myself, I didn't think it was like because we were kind of fucking around. I gave her the wet willy in the end.
yeah, yeah.
It didn't feel like really professional. So I was planning on not releasing it, but then I sent it to a few friends. And all my friends were like, nah, dude, it's not bad. Release it. And then I released it. And then it became my most popular video. So it's just, obviously, I'm really happy I released it. But it's just funny because I was literally like 50-50 about whether I want to release it or not.
Well,
I think
I
that,
think sorry, not to
yeah,
cut you off, but I think even the way that I look at a piece of content like that at this point, because again, back then I wasn't creating content, and now that I'm doing a lot of content, not just for myself but for my clients, is just like the way that you view content once you get on the back end of it is very different than what you do at the beginning. And again, you look at something like that, and it's like, holy shit, this is like pioneer level like content back in the day when shit like this wasn't getting released and was just like kind of new on the internet. Like it's gold. That piece
yeah,
of
I
content is
appreciate it,
gold.
man. To be honest, we were all surprised that YouTube let that video stay up because I feel like that was like kind of bordering on the line
Mm,
of like turning into a porno, basically. So I was happily surprised that YouTube was cool with it. TikTok would never let something like that go. Like
sure,
TikTok is
yeah.
way too sexual. I fucking say the word like fucking sex on TikTok and then the video gets like fucking taken down. So for YouTube, yeah, YouTube I guess is a little bit more chill. I think the second thing you were talking about was people just like circle jerking the communities. Yeah. I mean, what I said in that video that I did on self improvement, where I was reacting to you, is that theory has to be always counterbalanced with action. And at the very least, it should be 1-to-1. So you spend one
Yeah,
hour watching theory, you spend 1 hour doing action. But I think it should be in reality, should be like 1 to 3 or something. For every hour of theory, there should be like 3 or 4 hours of action at least. But I think 1-to-1 is like the bare minimum. But I think unfortunately for a lot of guys, it's like no action at all. Maybe like 20 hours of theory and 5 minutes of action. And then,
yeah.
so that just like, you never really, like, especially with dating type of stuff or red pill stuff, you're not going to get better with women unless you're actually going out and talking to women at the end of the day. Just like watching all the videos you're just mentally masturbating. You're just like absorbing the information, but you're not really absorbing it. So yeah, I think that's definitely a big issue I see in the community.
Certainly. And again, before doing what I do now, I was a violinist, and it's standard practice when you're either in college or working as a professional to be practicing anywhere between 4 and 6 hours a day. And that's because you want to be the absolute top of your craft. Now, am I
Yeah,
necessarily
imagine you just
suggesting?
watch YouTube videos on how to play the violin, but you never actually touch a violin.
Exactly. And I know that violin is an example that people can't really relate to most of the time. But again,
I
like
actually
even
used
think
to
of it.
play violin when I was younger too. It's funny.
Oh, hell yeah, dude. That's awesome. I'm so
Yeah.
happy to hear that. That's great. Well, I mean, I think even outside of violin, like riding a bicycle. If you read a book about reading a bicycle and you don't know how to ride a bike, like you could read the entire book front to cover and know how the physics work, like how much pressure you need to put down on like pedal A versus pedal B. But once you get on the bike, like the theory doesn't really matter. You got to like get on the fucking bike. So I really like the ratio thing that you're saying. But in order to really master something, you're right. It has to be 1 to 3, 1 to 6, 1 to 7.
Yeah, 1 to 10. Yeah, yeah. The
Mhm.
more, the better. I've never really seen someone say, you know what, dude, what's really missing in my life is I don't watch enough theory. I take too much action. I don't think I've
Yeah.
ever heard that. But I
Yeah.
have heard it thousands of times. Yeah, I don't actually talk to any girls. I just watch YouTube videos all day. I think that like it kind of comes down to is that most people like to take the path of least resistance,
Mm.
unless you train yourself out of that. And the path of least resistance is just sitting around on YouTube or TikTok all day. It's not like going out and talking to girls. It's not like building a business. It's not like going to the gym. It's watching shit or listening to shit or arguing with people in the comments or. So, and I think that I guess like kind of how I've always viewed things is like every year when I turn 1 year older, my birthday's January 4th. I look
Mm.
back at like that year and like, am I further along towards my goals than I want to be? And if I'm not, I'll feel sad and like I'll beat
Sure.
myself up over it for like a little bit of a period of time. And I know between I just turned turned 33 half a year ago, but between 32 and 33, I didn't really feel like I made substantial progress. And I was like, okay, I want 33 to 34 to be different. Like if I'm not further along, so I don't know. I think like a lot of people don't really do that. It would be my take.
Yeah, well, I think, most people don't have a knack for planning ahead, number one. And number two, like going out and taking action is hard. It's not just for dating either. It's hard for any of the things that you mentioned. And to everyone else's credit, I mean, the way that I really had to shock this out of my system and go out into the world and take action is I literally had to go to a different country to do it. I was like, I'm not going to do this shit in fucking Salt Lake City, Utah. I need to like go somewhere else. So I ended up living in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, for 3 months, and that's where I like started doing pickup, and very poorly, I might add. It was really fucking cringe at the beginning, but I have a video about this on my channel. It's the idea that you have to be willing to be cringe at the beginning in order to be great. And I'm not saying that I'm some great pickup artist necessarily, but I think with any new skill, you got to be willing to be cringe at the beginning in order to get where you want.
Yeah, everyone sucks at everything. I sucked when I first started doing videos. My early YouTube videos are ultra cringe. Hey, what's up, guys? Today we are gonna talk about sex. Yeah, I mean, like everyone sucks when they first do things. What are your biggest goals right now, or things you're like working towards?
Sure. So at this point with social media, again, I've managed some really really big brands, monetized it well. Their products well into the seven figures. In just several months. So I have a couple of really really successful projects under my belt, and I think the main thing right now is just growing Anti.Prophet to be as big as it can be, and to properly monetize it with courses that actually deliver value. That last part is super super important to me, just because I've managed a lot of courses which deliver subpar results, and we've made a lot of sales, but I get to the end of it and I feel greasy, and that's not something that I want to do here. I think outside of that, I'd love to be telling really, really interesting stories on my main channel here on YouTube, kind of having to do with just different things that I find interesting. I mean, for example, like a big criticism that I get for encouraging people to go out into the world and leverage cheaper countries while making US dollars to kind of, build your bag, is that I'm a neo-colonialist. And to me, whenever I get criticisms like that, that's the kind of video that I want to make. I want to really go to the core of, am I a neo-colonialist? And even if I am, do I care? Like, do I set my life up in such a way to kind of cater to other people's expectations, or do I just go out and get what it is that I want to get for myself? Like these are interesting questions that I think everyone would benefit from, even if they don't get to the end of my videos and think to themselves, okay, yeah, that's right. I don't need them to agree with me. I want to entertain these questions for people, because everyone's being called like a myriad of different negative things at this point in the world. And I think a lot of the times when that happens, they don't have the skill set, or they haven't done the thinking necessary to sort of counter those negative names being called to them. So if that's something that I can do with my content, very cool.
Who gives you shit for the traveling abroad and whatnot? I mean, I feel like it's common sense. If your job allows it and you like that country and you're making American dollars, yeah, they will go way further in a different country in South America, Southeast Asia, or Eastern Europe. Uh, who's actually giving you shit for that?
It's mostly it's just random people in the comments. And I think the kinds of people that I've run into like that in real life, it's funny. I remember this guy that I ran into in a dive bar in Salt Lake City, and he was just talking about how like shit the US was, and like how like we're neo-colonialists and we're like prostituting the world and like all these different things. And he was like, yeah, the rest of the world is like so much better than the US. And I just asked him, I was like, have you ever been out of the country? And he was like, no. I was like, okay. So I just think that ultimately it's just people kind of, projecting their own issues, their own insecurities onto not just me, but, anything that kind of preaches the idea of excellence or trying to make your own life work, just because I think a lot of people's lives are not working, and they have a lot of really negative energy from that. And they're trying to figure out, where to put that. And, sometimes that comes out on me and my content. That's something that I can deal with. But again, for me, it's an interesting intellectual exercise to cater to, and to kind of figure out for myself.
Yeah, it's funny because I would say I get shit for the opposite. Like a lot of black posts will be like, Alex, you don't talk about travel maxing enough. You talk about like profiles and photos and texting. And I'm like, how many fucking times do I need to talk about it? Like I've talked about it countless times, but yeah, like for me, I personally have like personal reasons why I'm in America. But if that wasn't the case, I would totally fucking go to. I would probably pick Colombia. That's the place I've been to the most,
Mhm.
and I've had good experiences in. Maybe Eastern Europe 2 or 3 years ago, before the whole situation in Ukraine happened.
Yeah, sure.
Um, I've never been to Southeast Asia, so why did you pick Bali out of like all the places?
Yeah, so that really had to do with a client living here. Like the client was like, "Hey, like I'd like to offer you this position, but under the stipulation that you relocate to Bali." Which again, just based on where I was in my life, I was like, "Fuck yeah, let's go." But being here now, and again, this is in the context of me, number one, being half Guatemalan, and number two, having lived in Rio for a couple of months. It's just I really like the vibe over here. I mean, in Rio is the kind of thing where I couldn't walk to the beach with my with my wallet, with my phone, like with anything, without potentially like getting robbed or whatever. And here I can literally leave my phone at a restaurant for like 45 minutes, go back for it, and it'll still be sitting in the same place. And I think that has to do a lot with the religious practices over here. Everyone is Hindu, and as a result, everyone believes in karma. Everyone believes in like the
Wait,
family.
in Bali, people are Hindu? Because I thought Indonesia generally is a Muslim country.
Yep, that's correct. So Indonesia has the most Muslims of any country in the world. But Bali, for whatever reason, I actually don't even know what the history is behind it, but it's this random island in Indonesia that is primarily Hindu, and I think it has to do with some sort of connection with India. I think I could be totally off on that, but that's what I've heard from my local friends. But yeah, in Bali, it's Hindu, believe it or not.
I didn't know that. So, would like if you have a client or a friend who's like, "Yo, I want to move abroad," would Bali be your number one choice, or is there other places that would be in the top three list for you?
Yeah, I think in Southeast Asia, Thailand is super killer. Bangkok is a big, overwhelming, dirty, dingy city, but there's a certain charm to that kind of vibe that I really, really like. The food scene, the nightlife is just off the walls. You'll never get anything like it, and it's very affordable. Recently, I went to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. I also really, really loved it over there. I think at this point, Bali is still going to be home base. I love it here. I've never been much of a nature guy, which is funny because again, I'm from Salt Lake City. But the nature here is just unbelievable. The beaches, the jungles, the waterfalls. It's like something out of a storybook. So I really, really fucking love that aspect to it. But on top of that, I really like spending time, let's say, in the Caribbean. I've spent a lot of time in Jamaica, for example, and it's a little bit shitty trying to do remote work there just because there are a lot of power outages, and if you're in the middle of some sort of call, or if you're a trader especially and the power goes out, like you'd be fucked. But yeah, no, I think Bali would be a great place to start for anyone who was looking to check out Southeast Asia and kind of do the digital nomad thing.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you actually this question. What's the cost of living in Bali?
Sure. So I have a 2-bedroom villa with a pool that I pay $720 a month for.
Damn,
Uh,
wait, you have the whole place to yourself?
yep, that's correct. Right now, I'm renting it out to other people just because I'm living a little bit farther north because I wanted to get out of the Canggu, which is sort of the main city area. Just to kind of focus on some work for the next month and a half. But yeah, I have that entire compound to myself. It's in the middle of this big, beautiful rice field in the middle of like where everything is happening in Bali. Now, that being said, I'm very lucky to have that place. I got it right at the end of the like right when Bali opened after the pandemic.
Mhm.
I signed for a year-long lease. The other thing, in order to get that kind of pricing in Bali, is you have to sign for a year-long lease, but then you have to pay it for all of it up front. So I did that for a year, but then the next year came and I thought they were going to triple the price just because everything around me tripled. So I was getting ready to pay, like $2,500-$3,000 for like per month. But they got back to me and they were like, okay, we've really thought about it, and we're going to increase your rent by $350 per year. And I was like, all right, take my
Uh,
money right now.
that's pretty awesome, dude. I pay 7,000 a month for 6,300 a month for a 2 bedroom apartment in a pretty nice high rise in the center of Berkeley, but it's 7,000. I don't get my own pool or whatever. I just share with
Mhm.
all people building. But yeah, I pay
So
7,000 a month.
I was going to ask, are you based in Brooklyn? Because my brother actually
Yeah,
lives
yeah,
in the Epic, believe it or not.
yeah. Oh, I know where the Epic is. Yeah, I'm at the Plaza. But yeah, I know where the Epic is like 10-minute walk from where I live.
Okay, cool, very nice. Yeah, he was in the Icon for a couple of years. Like
I lived
this
at the
was
Icon too. Yeah, I've been at the Icon.
okay, nice. Yeah, he was there like 8 or 9 years ago. It was a while ago, but yeah, eventually he was like, I need to go somewhere else. So we went to the Epic.
Yeah. What about in terms of like a restaurant? Like, how much would a meal at like a really, really nice restaurant cost?
So the nicest restaurant that you could probably go to here, like if I was really looking to dress to impress, it would be Santanera, which again is in the middle of Canggu. And I think per person for that, you'd probably end up spending like $35, $40. And this would be comparable to I'm trying to think I'm trying to think of the Miami restaurant that I go to all the time. It's not going to come to me in the next few seconds, but like literally the nicest dining that you could get in Miami can be gotten here for like $35, $40 per person.
Yeah, in Miami, like a top-notch restaurant. Well, I mean, there's different levels of it, but like let's say a
Hmm.
within reason top-notch restaurant would be like 250 a person or something like that, 200 a person. 30,
Hmm.
$40 in Miami per person would be like a cheaper place. So yeah,
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 that's
for sure. Yeah, I
that's
mean, it's totally different on that front, and like even the cost of transportation, I'm paying like $3 to fill up my scooter once a week. Utilities here are super, super affordable. And again, you have the entire island. I mean, even if you're not the kind of person that wants to like go out in order to have a good time, just go to the beach, man. Like go to the jungle, go to a waterfall, and all of it is going to cost you like a maximum of like 20 cents in order to
um,
pay for parking. It's wild.
yeah. What about with women? What like what's the ratio of like I guess like Asian girls to non-Asian girls in Bali?
Yeah, so there's obviously a lot of locals here, but in terms of like living in Canggu, living in Seminyak, living in Barawa, it's most of the people that you'll encounter on a day-to-day basis are digital nomads. So that kind of becomes a question of like, are they mostly European? Are they mostly Russian? Are they mostly from the U.S.? Mostly, up until I'd say probably a month ago, there were a lot of Russians here. But Russians are very, very fucking cool. They have a reputation for being very cold, which is true for the first like 30 seconds to 2 minutes of your interaction. But if you can kind of crack through that hard exterior shell, they're some of the warmest people you'll ever meet. And I'd say the same thing about well, my before I say that next thing, my current girlfriend is Russian as well. Lovely person, really amazing. So it's a lot of Russians, a lot of Europeans, and what I would say is, in terms of the U.S., there are probably less people from the U.S. here, just because it's so fucking far away. I think if people want to party from the U.S. and they want to go to somewhere tropical, it'll be somewhere like Colombia or the Caribbean or Hawaii. But yeah, a huge mixture of people for sure.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm actually also Russian myself.
Oh, cool. All right.
Yeah. But okay, so wait, so what would you say is like the roughly the ratio is? You said it's
Hmm.
mostly non-Asian girls in Bali?
So again, there are a lot of locals here. And in fact, like the ratio would far outweigh like the number of like digital nomad women, let's
Mm.
say. But it's the kind of thing where like that's you kind of like going into the outskirts of like Canggu or Seminyak or whatever, which most people honestly don't do unless they're just doing it for a day trip. And I think on top of that, at least for like the crew that I run with, I mean, you go there if you're looking to like kind of get into a relationship or whatever. I think most guys aren't really looking for necessarily like relationships with local women, and that's not like a racist thing or whatever. It's just I think in a lot of ways people are coming here to connect professionally, and to kind of connect with other digital nomads and that kind of thing. And that as a result, that's just the social group that you run with, and that's where you meet women most of the time.
Yeah, okay, so this is an interesting question from Anonymous. What did some of the digital nomads he met do for a living specifically?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of the nomads here are not really doing their own like entrepreneurial projects, which I think a lot of the time people hear about digital nomads, it's like, oh, go out and start your own hustle of doing XYZ. Like these guys are doing like copywriting for businesses. They're running Facebook ads for businesses. They're running social media marketing agencies for different clients. There's a pretty healthy community here, I'd say, of like crypto traders, which in that case that would be kind of people doing their own thing. But yeah, there are less like big baller digital nomads than you would necessarily think in a place like Bali. And the reason I say that is because I think people look at this sort of lifestyle and they think to themselves, oh, well, I could do that if, I have like my 7-figure, 6-figure business that's doing X, Y, Z in terms of revenue, and then I could make something like that happen. But a lot of the people that I've met here, making pretty, reasonable money, 50, 60K, and they're still living like kings in a place like Bali.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that gives you like definitely. It's like making 50K in like a place like Bali is like making like 250K in
Yeah,
America, something
absolutely.
like that. Yeah, I remember I was in Colombia, like 4 months ago, and yeah, it was just like we go to like a really fancy restaurant, like really nice place, and the bill would be like $100. Yeah,
Yeah.
like in Miami, this would be like 400, 500. Yeah, a massage, like not like a happy ending massage, like a real massage costs like $30. In Miami, it's like 150 minimum, like, or maybe 120. But yeah, in Miami, you're not going to get a $30 massage unless it's like some homeless dude down the street or something like that. So you're not going to get like a respectable massage parlor. I sound like such a respectable massage parlor. um, but yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense, man. Like like again, if I didn't have like some reasons that I do, I would totally move to either, I'll probably check out Bali. I would check out Thailand. I have a friend right now who's in Vietnam. He likes it over there a lot.
Oh yeah, yeah. I should have mentioned Vietnam. I spent a few days in Hanoi. Really, really cool city. Bustling, but like not too overwhelming.
Have you traveled around Eastern Europe a lot?
So the only traveling in Eastern Europe that I've done was 10 days in Istanbul, which I thought was very cool. But I don't know if I would necessarily live there for more than a month. And I honestly don't know why I'm saying that necessarily. It's just it didn't really feel like the vibe for me.
Yeah. You've never been to Poland, then, I assume, right?
No, I haven't. I have a lot of Polish friends here, but never been to Poland.
Out of like, I've traveled around Eastern Europe a good amount. I would say Poland was probably my favorite country in Eastern Europe. They actually have like pretty like comparable technology to what we do, meaning in terms of like medical shit or like you don't really feel like you're in a third world country, basically, right? Like
Yeah.
you can get all the same shit you can in America. Everything's a lot cheaper. The girls are ultra hot. They can be a little stuck up, but they're ultra hot. The food is really, really good. The food scene in Warsaw is like amazing. I remember I was getting like sushi almost every day. There's just like this one place where you just get like fucking sushi burritos, and they have this like fat ass piece of salmon and tuna, and the whole thing would be like $3-4. It was like damn.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So yeah, Poland was a dope spot. They have a lot of paleo healthy options. I'm sure Bali's probably like that too. There's a lot of healthy options.
A lot of healthy options, just because a lot of people who come here are very like health and like spiritually
Yeah.
conscious or whatever. So there's a lot of catering to that community for sure.
How many people would you say roughly live in like the center of Bali?
That's a good question. Fuck. I don't actually know if I know. I think I asked someone how many people lived in Bali like a year ago. And I asked this while I was partying a lot, so I don't know if I remember the answer. But I think it's somewhere in the realm of maybe 3 or 4 million. Don't hold me to that. But
Yeah,
I
I
think
just looked it up. It's 4.4 million.
that's
So
amazing. I remember that. Yeah.
it's back, man. Yeah, it's more people than I actually thought. It's a big place. Okay, so let me kind of circle back to what we were discussing earlier. So we talked about your kind of things you didn't like about the pickup community. What about the red pill and MGTOW community? What were the things you saw in those communities that you thought were kind of goofy?
Just overall hatred towards women. And I know a lot of people would disagree with my use of the word hatred, but when you like basically build a brand out of making people look stupid, regardless of whether or not you're using like facts or logic, it becomes obvious over a certain period of time in terms of like how you feel about a certain demographic of the population. And I would say that obviously much more about MGTOW versus Red Pill. I think MGTOW is mostly comprised of men who, rightfully so, are very, very skeptical of, marriage, have gotten really, really fucked over, but have gone about it, like dealing with it in a way that is ultimately anti-life affirming. And if we're going to use like a Nietzschean terminology here. It's just that experience has shocked them into inaction in their life, and I don't think that's all that useful in the event that you're looking to create a better future, not just for yourself but for the people around you, and create a legacy that causes you to be remembered. I don't know if like adhering to MGTOW ideology is the best way to do that. So again, with Red Pill, I'm trying to think of necessarily something specific. I know you've had certain beefs with certain people in the community. I don't know. Am I allowed to like drop names here or whatever?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want, dude. We don't have any rules around here.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so like for example, it's just like a lot of the stuff that I just happen to see peripherally from like Fresh and Fit or whatever. And on top of that, just in terms of like how they market certain programs, like there was that debacle like a year ago or so about them selling like some sort of like uh dating course where the bigger guy, can't ever remember who's who on the show,
Modern.
but
But
yeah,
good.
yeah, this is kind of the fatter guy was talking about him hanging out with like NBA players and like the
Oh,
story
that's
that
fresh. Yeah, like that. Yeah.
yeah, it just I don't know, man. It's just like, especially when you have to resort to marketing a course in such a way to get XYZ result that you're looking for, it's just an indication that, at least for me, like that's the kind of person that I would want to avoid even doing business with. Just because if you have strong results behind a product, like you don't have to resort to like bizarre stories like that. Even if that story is true, like there are different ways of like marketing your product, like highlight like
There is no way
customer
that story is
testimonials.
true. That
Yeah,
story is ridiculous.
exactly. It's like
Whatever.
it's
This
yeah, but like
NBA player came up to me asking for me where to party. And then he simultaneously invited me to a party. Hey man, do you know where I can find a party? Oh, by the way, I'm doing a party. Like the story made like no sense at all. Yeah, I don't think even like their audience believed it, honestly. Like if you look at the comment section, everyone's like, cap, fraud. But yeah, I think like the course. So Fresh and Fit has a lot of hustles. They do a lot of different things. Like
mhm.
I know like one of the things they do is they charge people to to watch from backstage. I know that's something that they're doing. They have their Patreon, they have like multiple courses or whatever. But at that time, they had like an Instagram course. And here's the funny thing, right? So Instagram, if you have an Instagram course, the idea is that your Instagram should be pretty good. So there was this one episode around that time where Fresh had a bunch of girls on the show rate his Instagram, and he just got annihilated. They were like, "Oh, he looked like a scammer. This is so tacky. This is the worst Instagram I've ever seen." Like all the girls were just roasting his Instagram. And then Fresh, because he's kind of dumb, he's like too dumb to know. So he's like, "Oh, do Myron next." And Myron's like, "No, no, 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 we got it. Dude, we already destroyed 50% of our credibility. Don't destroy the other 50%." Fresh is like, "No, no, come on, do this next." Myron's like, "We gotta go. We gotta end the show. We don't have time." But yeah, I enjoyed that part.
That's hilarious. Yeah, man. I don't know. I think, and maybe even getting back to the John Anthony lifestyle or whatever. I think when you're marketing your way in such, marketing your services in such a way where you're talking about like some sort of like bed count of like 1,400 or whatever. I mean, all that really tells me is that someone is like deeply troubled. I have no idea why I would necessarily like want to be with someone who was just like notch count, notch count, notch count. And that was like the main thing that was going on. And then also builds a brand around like just like making like really like pointed accusations to other creators in the space or whatever. Like it's just, I don't know. It's just there's a certain vibe to the people in Red Pill that I don't know. I would personally want to stay away from, even in a professional context. So
Yeah, it makes sense. John Anthony is like the only person I can't really comment on in detail because we had some legal shit and we have a legal ceasefire right now because he was like
oh
trying
my
to sue me
god.
and shit. Yeah, it's a whole fucking complicated thing.
Okay, all right, yeah, we'll
Oh, you're good.
move
You're
on
good.
from that one.
I understand what you're talking about. So let me move on to this. How would you say, like, if someone asks you, how do you master ego? How would you respond to that?
So I think with that, there are two uses of the word ego that I sort of operate with. The first is Jungian, and really all Carl Jung talks about when he uses the word ego is just everything within your conscious mind. And then I think the rest of the world uses the word ego in terms of sort of like your sense of pride, your sense of like just like going out into the world and sort of being willing to put your ego aside to get shit done. So I'll kind of deal with the second version. So I think in order to kind of get your ego in check, at least for me, I really kind of had to get thrown to the bottom, and I had to learn how to pick myself up. That was the most practical, I don't know, training experience, I guess I could say. Because I think a lot of the time, at least for me, it's just like if life is going like pretty okay to begin with, like if it's pretty mediocre, at least this is the way that it used to be, then I was fine. There was no reason for me to like take myself out of something that was like at least kind of working in order for my ego to take a hit, in order to potentially get something better in the future. And that has to do with like how I was raised or like that kind of thing. But I think, something that I can trace back to violin is at least the ability to uh, basically take good information when it's being given to you by a coach, and be willing to put your ego aside in order to implement it.
Um,
So I think, as far as, if just so that the people listening to this aren't sitting around waiting for like some devastating thing to happen in their lives and say, okay, then I'll learn to put my ego aside. Just pick one thing, and it doesn't even have to be dating. Like pick like the gym, pick some sort of like new skill, pick talking to women, doesn't matter. Like, but pick something where your ego can get like basically beat up on a daily basis, and get used to the feeling around that, and just have it be part of like your daily and weekly process of how you go through life. And once you learn how to do that in one area, you'll be able to copy and paste that ability into pretty much any area of life that you want.
yeah, for sure, man. I mean, I think that humbling yourself is definitely good. And when you get to a point where you think you know everything, that's when things start going downhill for
Hmm.
you. It can be tricky, especially when you like reach a point of like status or success. It can be tricky to like kind of like swallow your ego. It's a lot easier when you're like not successful because you're like, oh, whatever. But if you get to a point of like relative success and whatever it is you're pursuing, then it's like it's a lot harder. But I think it's necessary. It doesn't have to be like an all or nothing thing. It's not like you can't
Hmm.
have an ego, but yeah, I think also like seeking out information from people that are better than you is
Yeah.
always good. I do that all the time. I just, for example, paid Anthony Johnson for an hour of coaching on the YouTube. I paid, I forget another person about YouTube coaching. I've got marketing coaching. I mean, I'm like, if I think someone has value contribute to something I'm not that good at, like I'll just like pay the money for it, and I'll just like get coaching, because if I think they're good and I think they're worth it. So yeah, I think that's good. Also, like if you think you
Yeah.
know everything, that's tough, man, because you're gonna, you don't know everything at the end of the day. You can only know a few things that you're good at.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, again, the necessity for surrounding yourself with A players, whether that's within your organization in terms of like, scaling your team, or just like the colleagues that you surround yourself with, the friends that you surround yourself with, as well as the mentors that you surround yourself with. Like, I know I keep going back to violin, but it's just the thing that I can probably speak the most to is just like when I was playing with shit players in like a small group string quartet, the level of my playing would go down. And it's just because I wouldn't have to bring as much to the table. But when I'm playing with people who are, doing like concertos with like the Berlin Philharmonic, my level of playing automatically goes up, and it's just a matter of trying to mimic and keep up with the quality of work that's around you. So the more you can surround yourself with that type of talent, the better.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about like surrounding yourself with the right people. Let's start with this question on this topic. What were your biggest inspirations and still are? Like the people that you learned the most from. Like for me, for example, I would say Arnold Schwarzenegger is like a huge
Hmm.
motivation. Like if you ask me who's like the number one person you want to get on your podcast, probably would be him. And I've read his book a bunch of times. Like I think I've learned a lot from him. When it comes to pickup, I learned a lot from swooptheworld.com, Revolutionary Lifestyle Design, RSD Julian. So those would be mine. What would be your biggest sources inspiration?
Yeah, so I think right now in terms of business, I'm really, really digging Alex Hormozy's content.
Okay.
Just every time that I hear that guy talk, I'm like, damn, that was like very, very well put. So I'm really digging that. I think in terms of literature that I've read that has had the biggest impact on me, I would say probably Carl Jung, Nietzsche, as well as a modern day guy by the name of Dr. Gabor Mate, who's a guy who kind of delves into the science behind addiction. So I think those have been really, really valuable for me. Like I said, man, you were one of the first channels that I watched for pickup or just like Tinder stuff
Oh,
in
no.
general. Like that was really fucking cool.
Oh,
I
I had no idea you even knew who I was. when I reached out to you.
Yeah, dude, like straight up back in 2020, I was like, oh shit, this guy's like, this guy's the tits. Because back in 2020, I haven't brought this up as of yet, but my second foray into the digital marketing space was actually a Tinder course that I was creating with a female friend of mine, and her and I ended up having a fallout, business related, and that ruined the friendship as well. But kind of as a result, we were obviously doing market research and that kind of thing, and stumbled across your channel very, very early on. So yeah, I got into your stuff very, very early. But yeah, I think aside from you, I'm even to this day a pretty big fan of the natural lifestyles.
Yeah.
I think their content is
I've,
very just like,
I've interviewed those guys. Yeah, they're cool.
yeah, very low key guys, just a very practical approach to all of it. I don't know if I necessarily like whenever I was doing pickup, I wouldn't really do the meditation stuff too often. I think that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
just a bit woo woo for me, but yeah, they're great. And and then I think the person who kind of got me started into any of this personal development stuff was probably Jordan Peterson. I don't consume too much of his content these days, but I think when life was originally falling apart, like it was a lot of his content that kind of helped me get from A to B in terms of just getting to the next day.
Yeah. So I think with natural lifestyles, actually, do you know who Liam McRae is?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he's always behind the scenes now. I talked to him privately. He told me he's just like he's tired of being in front of the camera. He prefers doing behind the scenes. That dude is a fucking OG. I mean, that guy. I've seen that guy do some crazy ass shit. I used to be in a Facebook group with him for like it's kind of corny, but a bunch of dudes who get laid a lot. And
Mhm.
some of the stories he was posting, man, the photos he was sharing, I was like, damn, this dude knows what the fuck he's doing. So yeah, I wish that dude would actually be more in front of the camera because I think he has a lot of value to share. I mean, he used to make a lot of content, but yeah, I think he's
This
definitely.
is the redhead with the beard, right?
I don't think he's redhead. He's more blonde.
Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong guy. Okay, continue, and I'll look him up really quick.
In terms of Jordan Peterson, yeah, I think there's like two Jordan Petersons though. There's like the old Jordan Peterson and new Jordan Peterson. Like the old Jordan Peterson, he was like pretty based. He was like kind of gave some pretty good advice. I don't know. New Jordan Peterson, I feel like he's just become like a alt right talking point, repetitor. Where he just like says all the same shit that I've heard like a million times, like in the alt right community. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, here's kind of what I would say about that. Again, I think for me personally, Jordan Peterson was a really, really great gateway drug into ideas that and literature that like really kind of split my psyche open in the best way possible. He really was the gateway drug to me, like consuming Nietzsche, Jung, and a couple of other writers. And the impact and value that those writers had on my life is not to be it can't be overstated necessarily. So I will always be grateful to Jordan Peterson for that. But for example, like he came out with his second book, Another 12 Rules for Life or whatever, and it's just it's just like what I was saying with the pickup artist stuff. It's just like at a certain point, like certain pieces of information show up in your life in such a way where you can use them to get to the next step. And as time goes on, like you integrate what you like, you let go of what you don't, and then you kind of move on. And I think with Jordan Peterson, for example, it's just the kind of thing where he got me to that next step, and I don't really have any interest in reading his second book, just because I don't think I would necessarily need it based on where I am in my life.
Yeah, I think something flipped in his head. I know he had a really tragic story.
With the benzodiazepines.
Yeah, yeah, which I know I could personally attest to are extremely addictive. Um, yeah, so and I know he basically Michaela said that he like tried like 20 different clinics. He like, kept relapsing or whatever. It wasn't helping. He was like really messed up. Eventually, apparently, it was some clinic in Russia that helped him. That
Mm-hmm.
was all pre like Ukraine war. But yeah, I don't know if it would have happened naturally anyway, but it seemed like some kind of like a flip switch. Because what I really respect about people is who can think for themselves and like don't just adopt, something that just their side says. So I feel like Jordan Peterson, like in 2007, 2018, he was like, he was coming up with his own thoughts. Versus now, like I feel like everything he says is something I've heard 1,000 times in the alt right. Like if I interviewed him, the first question I would be like, "What are things you disagree with the alt right on?" and I don't really think he'd be able to say anything, honestly. Like, not, at least not as far as I know. I mean, he like goes through like the typical talking points, like, and like some of these talking points have like value to it. Like, yeah, I think the trans stuff can be a little silly, but it's just like this obsession. It's like, oh my god, trans people are taking over the world. They're gonna chop your dicks off. It's like, Jesus Christ, dude.
Yeah, I think ultimately the most value that I probably get out of Peterson's stuff at this point are his podcast guests. For example, he interviewed this guy by the name of Ian McGilchrist, and he's interviewed him, I think, a number of times at this point. But this is a guy who has done a lot of research into the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain and the differences between the two sides, and wrote a book called The Master and His Emissary, which is a really, really fantastic book. But yeah, again, I think there's maybe a difference between like the personal opinions that a person is sharing versus like, again, acting as a conduit to connect larger audiences with different like really, really amazing thinkers. And I think if I do engage with Peterson's stuff these days, it's in the context of again his podcast rather than his lectures on the Book of Exodus or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 I was gonna say Alex Hormozy actually has a funny video. He doesn't reference Jordan Peterson directly, but he says it's like a video where he's talking about like, hey guys, make your bed, but wake up at 6 a.m. Make your bed if you want to be successful. He's like, actually, making your bed has absolutely nothing to do with success because you're just taking sheets and you're putting them on your bed. That's not actually going to make you money. So he has like a funny video where he like kind of like makes fun of the idea that like making your bed is going to like, really benefit your life. I see the argument for like why, you should make your bed, but I do think there's like, I did a whole video on this, like there's self-improvement bros where you just become like, you go too far down the self-improvement path and you're focusing on all these things that don't really matter. You're like, I'm waking up even earlier. I'm waking up at 4 a.m.
Sure.
now. It's like, okay, motherfucker, I wake up at 4 p.m., but I would say I'm more successful than you, right? So I don't know, if you feel like people can just like go down this weird rabbit hole and focus on things that don't really matter, like how early you wake up being one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Oh, sorry. Go for it.
No, go ahead. I'll finish.
Yeah, no, I think all I was going to say there is for whatever reason, the type of guy that I think Jordan Peterson generally speaks to, and I it's not that I used to be a gamer or drink Mountain Dew or whatever, but like the whole make your bed thing seems like it's a really great message for the kind of guy who lives in his mom's basement, plays video games all day, and drinks Mountain Dew, because that is actually very useful information. It's go and do something productive for the love of God. But at the same time, someone like Alex Hormozy or whatever, like the only reason I'm, resonating with his content at this point is because, again, like I'm working on like 7-figure accounts, and I'm looking to kind of like figure out not just how to potentially take that to 8-figure accounts on other people's side, but to like build my own brand as well, how to scale teams, how to interview effectively for sales positions or whatever. So I think Hormozy's making a very good point, because I think if you, are holding on to those old ideas that may have gotten you out of your mom's basement, and you're still like and you're in a position now where you're scaling your teams and doing blah, 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 or whatever. Yeah, you're right. Like making your bed is something that you should probably just hire out at this point, because you can use that energy to work on your business.
Yeah, you have like a client call. So why do you think your company can benefit us? Well, you see, I woke up at 4 a.m. today and I made my bed. And my bed is really good. Here, let me video chat, show you my bed.
Exactly.
Yeah, let me ask you this. What do you think of Andrew Tate? What are your thoughts about that guy?
It's funny, man. Like the longer he's out of the media, the more I'm like, Andrew Tate, what a crazy person. But then like he does like his PBD interview, and I get to the end and I'm like, damn, 90%, like 99% of that was pretty fire. Here's the thing. Again, I view this kind of thing much differently than I would if I was just like the regular person who's not creating content. I think he is a masterful content creator. And as a result, when I watch that kind of thing, it's like I'm so entertained and I'm so enthralled, even with the way that he's wording things, because it's so masterfully put together for shorts or for like medium pieces of long form or whatever. And that's something that I'd love to be able to even just do in my own content or whatever. But in terms of content, right? Like in terms of his like view of the world. Again, I'm generally pretty big into the idea that the best way that I could set up my own life, let's say, is to be someone who is like very sexually desirable for the majority of women that I interact with, but I conduct myself in such a way where I just pick one woman. And for me, the only reason I go in that direction is just because that aligns better with the goals that I have for myself in my own life. I'm not going to sit here and espouse to anyone else what's going to be best for them, though, you know, who has dated a lot of women at the same time. It just, I got to the end of it and it felt kind of hollow. And I think a lot of guys feel that same way as well. And also there are some guys that don't feel that way. So, you know, who am I to speak on whatever? But I think in terms of his content previously, before he converted to Islam, going out and preaching the idea that like peak masculinity was basically being surrounded by a bunch of hoes, partying all the time and having like Lambos. I don't know. I think that there's something potentially a bit deeper than that. I made a video a few weeks ago about the idea that Aragorn from the Lord of the Rings is actually one of the best depictions of peak masculinity in pop culture in the 21st century, just because like, you know, he's confronted with like situation after situation where he conducts himself with honor, acts in the face of like utter destruction, even in like dating situations kind of thing. In the show, he's a very honorable guy and is very respectful of the person who's in front of him and doesn't treat people like shit. So I think that's kind of changed. Getting back to Andrew Tate, I think that's kind of changed now that he's converted to Islam. But you know, I've very much been the kind of person who says, "Oh, I'm this religion," but then my life goes in a completely different direction in terms of the way that I act on my day-to-day life. So who knows if that's actually the case? But yeah, I think his interview with PBD was fascinating, and there were very few things where he said something and I was like, I disagree with that.
Yeah, I watched about 25-30% of it, and I watched about 50% of the one with Tristan.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, I agree with you. There was not much that was said during that interview that I specifically disagreed with. The only thing I would say that I saw, like, I don't like the oversimplistic Matrix analogy. Because
Yeah,
it's not that simple. It's really not. There's not a group of people sitting in a room who are like, let's take down Andrew Tate. It's the reality. What it comes down to is there's a local prosecutor who thinks this will make his career, and then there might be, you know, another, police officer who thinks this is good for his career because whatever, and then there might be a girl who comes forward. So it's just like all these things. So I think people give like the government and authority like way too much credit in terms of what they can control. Typically, it's like loosely tied things. So I think the Matrix thing is, I understand why he does it. It's smart. It's really smart. It's really good branding, right? Mm-hmm. You're rallying your people behind, it's like basically building a cult 101. It's like, what's more sexy, the explanation I just gave, or the Matrix is trying to take us down, guys, right? So it's really smart, marketing for sure. Yeah, I guess I'd be curious, like, to have a conversation. I mean, I had a conversation with his brother once, but this question didn't come up. But like offline to see if they like actually truly believe the Matrix, or they're just simply saying this because they know that's the most effective way to market. But I do agree, Andrew is a very, very good marketer and content creator. And yeah, the more polarizing you are, the more views you will get. That's just kind of what it comes down to at the end of the day. And like me and my girlfriend have discussed it, that like my biggest weak point as a content creator is I'm too logical, I'm too chill. You're never going to see me like making over the top statements where like, yeah, bitch, get in the kitchen, like, unless I'm doing it in an obviously joking way. But that's also like kind of a little bit of a weak point, right? Because that's not as catchy as like me doing some like fucking really polarizing shit. So it's like as a content creator, it's like a little bit of a catch-22 that I struggle with. It's like, well, I want to get more views, I want to get more subs, but I don't want to like not be myself, like put on a charade, So
sure.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is what I would say. I think the only reason why my brand has grown with the velocity that it has is because like I am kind of a centrist. I'm trying to sort of like give both sides of the aisle like their fair due, while also being like critical of both sides. And I think like especially right now in the American psyche, that's something that people are craving because people are so tired of the polarization. So I think if that's just generally like how you are, I lean into that, man. And I know you've been at this game for a long, long time. So you're not just like speaking from like a theoretical like standpoint. You're just like, hey, the content is like that I've produced. I've been this way. It's produced like X result, whatever. So like I get where you're coming from. But I think for whatever reason, there's like this change in the way that people are consuming content. And I think it's going to take like 3 or 4 years to fully like come to fruition. But the election is going to drive it just because people are going to get so fucking tired of that. But I think like being like centered, being grounded, and just like being reasonable in the type of content that you're creating. That's going to be something that people consume, and they're going to start consuming content that isn't so like ADD Mr. Beastification of everything. I think that's even kind of seen its time in the sun, and it's now starting to retreat back into the shadows a bit. But if that's generally how you communicate, which again, having consumed your content for a long time, I would say just stick with it. I think your time in the sun in terms of that kind of content is coming up.
Oh yeah, I'm not planning on like actually changing what I'm doing. I mean,
Yeah, awesome.
I'd rather be my like I don't know. I feel like it would be so cringy. Like I feel like it would be also I don't know. Maybe that wouldn't be the case. I feel like if I was like putting on an act, it'd be like super duper obvious. Like I like, yo, what's up, guys? We are here doing crazy podcasts. Yo, Anti.Prophet, you got your bitch sucking your. I don't know. I feel like to me that's like super duper obvious. This is an interesting comment. Alex, you're playing a losing game, bro, unless you innovate something new YouTube or worse, the worst things. Yeah, I mean, I sort of agree with that, at least at this point in time. But at the end of the day, also like when I look at things in perspective, like I'm doing pretty well, like I'm not complaining about the growth. I'm getting about 100, 150 subs a day. I would like to get 1,000 subs a day, but like it's something, right? So I'm living comfortably. So yeah, that's kind of like what, I don't know. The way I view it is I just want to like keep making even more and more interesting content. Like that's why I've been doing a lot of street interviews recently, and they're a lot of fucking work. But I'm trying to make like the most interesting content possible for my regular videos. But yeah. Okay, so the other question I was going to ask you was about like inner game. So what would you say are some things you can do to improve your inner game as a guy?
Define what your boundaries are. I think even like going out and having a conversation with women, for example. I mean, it's the kind of thing where like if I'm out at a bar, I'm not doing this so much anymore because again, I'm in a relationship. But like if I'm out at a bar and I go and like have a conversation with someone and they're just being like just awful to talk to, and when I say awful, I mean that could be them like being aggressive, standoffish, or just like simply not interesting. Like my boundary for myself is just like, hey, like I want to be like surrounded with like people that are easy to talk to and like are interesting. Like I can deal with a bit of a push and pull in terms of the interaction at the beginning, just because that's how human beings are. And again, even with what I was talking about with Russians, if you can break through like people's like hard exterior in the first like 2 minutes, then people open up, and that's fine. I don't need people to be like open when I first speak to them, but I would say know what it is that you're looking for, not just from women, but just everyone around you. And then you will then be able to use that information to inform how you interact with other people. And you will be able to use that to kind of have like a bit of courage in terms of like going out and speaking to people, because it becomes less so trying to figure out what they can like give to you, or what you can like take from them, or what they can offer you or whatever. And it's more of like you going into a situation and being like, wow, like I have something to offer people. So it's sort of you're changing the inner supply and demand of like who you are as a person in relation to the outside world. I think that would be something that would be very useful. I think on top of that, also just trying to figure out. Oh, this is the other thing I would say. Always tell the truth as well. Be truthful in your interactions with people. I think a lot of guys, especially when they're getting into pickup or whatever, they try and like go out and use XYZ script to kind of get what it is that they want, when just going out and like having like a normal conversation that you can potentially build sexual chemistry within, that's going to be something that again allows you to open up much more over kind of a medium period of time, because you need to go out and be cringe at the beginning, because when you're honest at the beginning you just sound like a buffoon, because we all do. But if you can kind of get past that, going out and having truthful interactions with people will lend itself even to what I was talking about in terms of like knowing who you are, knowing what your boundaries are, and knowing what you have to provide and offer the person that you're speaking to.
Yeah, you said a lot of good things here. Let me quickly address this comment, and then we'll go back into discussion about leveling up your self-improvement. Every debate Alex does is too friendly. He agrees with everybody. He's a people pleaser, and it's not as good as this debate format. Okay, so I am generally a friendly person. I'm not gonna like be a dick. to get more views. That's just not who I am. But I certainly don't agree with everybody. I've had some brutal fucking debates where I've gone like really personal. Look at my like old TikTok SJW debates. Like some of the feminists I've gone, toe to toe with. Me and Stefan had a fucking ruthless debate. So yeah, if someone's a massive dick to me, I will be ruthless back. But I'm not going to just be a dick to someone for no reason. Like if someone's respectful towards me, I'm going to be respectful towards them. I just couldn't bring it in me to just be disrespectful to someone for the sake of like content reviews, right? Like so, and at the end of the day, most people are pretty respectful and cool, right? Generally speaking, right? That's just kind of what it comes down to. So yeah, like that's not being a people pleaser. That's just trying to be like a fucking, I don't know, I think a decent human being. But anyway, so yeah, I think that lol, being a jerk for content is terrible. We're talking about improving your self-esteem. Yeah, I think like kind of the way I've always looked at it is there's two paths, right? The external and the internal path. So I actually wound up taking largely the external path. But so the external path is you basically get positive reference experiences from the outside world, and that improves your self-esteem. So, for example, with women, for me, that was like, becoming successful with women. And then my belief that I had when I was 18, which is that I suck with women, went away because there's so much positive reference experiences, right? Same thing with money, same thing with fitness, same thing with like all the other things that I struggled with, right? So it was largely my worldview and my inner game was largely changed by my external experiences. I do know there's a different way to do it. And I'm fascinated by this. I have friends who've done it this way, and they do it without really seeking experiences from the external world. They do like inner work, where either they do it through like some kind of meditation practice or something like that. What do you think about that?
I think there's a lot of value to that as well. In terms of the way that you sort of posited the question the second time around, I almost wish I would have answered it the way that you ended up answering it with, because something that I tell people who are working with me, either just like in a personal coaching setting, or again, like even my past violin students or whatever, I would say you need to like go out and take action, and like going out and taking action is going to inform how you like actually feel about yourself in the end. And it's going to do it a lot better and a lot faster than going out and working on like inner game. I think maybe something that I wish I would have done more of at the beginning of, the fallout of my, that happened after my marriage was just going out and taking a lot more action. Instead of just like focusing so much on the inner game, because I feel like had I done that, I would have gotten a lot more results a lot faster. But at the same time, on the other side of the coin, I'm very happy that I spent the amount of time that I did with the inner game stuff to then inform the way that I was going out into the world and doing the external stuff. Just because I think had I just gone straight for the external stuff at the beginning, it would have been me like just trying to sort of fill a void and fill a hole emotionally, rather than like going out and having like just normal exchanges with ideally normal people.
Yeah, I think it also kind of matters what your expectations are. I had this one client, I remember this was like maybe a month ago, who's like a virgin, and he also had some kind of mental disorder. I think he was autistic or something like that. Well, it wasn't like to the point where he couldn't interact at all, but it was like noticeable, right?
Yeah.
So this guy had like an uphill battle, and he was like saying, "Yeah, Alex, I really want to lose my virginity, but do you think I'll have to fuck a 7, or can I get away with just doing 8s?" I was like, "Bro, like
Yeah.
I lost my virginity to a fatty on the beach in Mexico. Not saying you have to do that, but like." Really, an 8 for your first lay? That's what your bar is? Like, you're going to keep, like, that's pretty fucking crazy. Like, an 8? Really? Save that for, like, the third or fourth. Like, at least do a fucking 6 or something like that. But yeah, like, but if your idea of success is, like, I'm going to fuck the hottest chick at the club, then you're just going to be, like, spinning your wheels for a while. So for me, when I was getting into game, my metric of success was actually just, like, getting girls' phone numbers. Like, if I got a girl phone number, that was a successful like outing, and then I would feel like motivated. If I slept with a girl, that was like really fucking crazy, right? But like even if I didn't sleep with a girl, it's like, all right, I went out, I got 2 phone numbers. This was a successful day. So I do think it matters what you set the metric to or set the bar to. If you set it too high, then you're just gonna get frustrated. You're gonna quit. I've seen that happen so many times.
Yeah, well, I mean, with content creation, for new content creators that I've worked with, if they're coming into content creation and their metric is to have like their first video get like 1 million views or whatever, they're going to be disappointed. Like the first metric of success, more than anything, should be the consistency in terms of how often you're putting out content, whether that be like consistently 3 times a week or consistently twice a day. It doesn't matter. As long as you can do that over and over and over the course of 3 weeks, then you can think to yourself, okay, what's the next step? What's the next thing that would like challenge me in a way that will, number one, like push me to a higher level, but also remain within the realm of reasonability where I won't just completely implode and be like, fuck this. Like that's the game that people want to play. And, you know, copy and paste what I just said over to women. It's like you said, like get the number, or even more so, like to begin with, just go and talk to women. Like just go and talk to 4 women, even if you completely blow out at the beginning. As long as you talk to 4 women every day for like 5 days, then you've completed your quota. You're great. But then the next week, the idea is to stay in the set for like a minimum of like 1 minute, then a minimum of 2 minutes. Then from there, like get the number. Then from there, like get the date. Then from there, get laid. Like it has to be incremental, as you said.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Okay, guys, if you have any question for Anti-Prophet or me, get them in now because I'm gonna ask him one more question and then we'll just go to Q&A. Probably go for another 20 minutes or so. I want to ask you about relationships because this is kind of how we started with. You mentioned one big thing, boundaries. What are some other you think important essential tools or qualities or whatever, or whatever you want to call it, to have a successful relationship?
Acknowledging the differences between men and women and embracing them rather than trying to, fight against them. I think in previous relationships, I used to really fight against the idea that the women I was dating were emotional, and I would try and deal with like disagreements in a very logical frame. And it's not that I don't bring logic to the situation anymore, but just like any good business negotiation, if you know where your client is coming from and like what they have on their mind, you will be in a much better position to address the issues that they might have with your product or service if you engage with them in a way that makes sense from the frame that they're coming from, as opposed to just going in and being like, okay, this is this way, this is this way, this is this way. So copy and paste what I said from clients over to women. Just kind of know your audience and be willing to communicate in such a way where you're not like rolling over and like giving up on things that you should be fighting for in terms of like your point of view, but communicate in a way that is that the other person can hear and process. That's number one. Number two, again, just being honest. Being honest in the way that you feel from moment to moment. If there's something that happens that like really rubs you the wrong way, in you know it kind of depends on where you are in your life. If you're in a place where you feel like you really know yourself very well and you're feeling very calm and centered, then you can bring up something when it happens in the moment and say, hey, that like kind of bothered me, would you mind like doing like XYZ? And then you can have a conversation about it. If it's something you're less sure of, a really great rule that again I actually got from Jordan Peterson back in the day was just letting, if someone does something to you that's kind of bothers you, let it go 3 times, and after the 3rd time you can bring it up. And the reason you do that is, number one, you don't want to like go and like get angry with your partner at every little thing that they do. That's just not going to play in your favor, because everyone has a finite amount of political capital and you have to spend it wisely. So by letting someone do something 3 times, you can kind of figure out if it's something that's going to continue happening in the future, because if it happens 3 times, it's a good indication that it will. And number 2, when you bring it up, usually what happens when you say, hey, like you did this and it kind of like affected me this way, the other person generally says, oh no, like that didn't happen, or like, oh, I didn't mean it that way, or like whatever. By letting it happen 3 times, you can point back and be like, no, not only did it happen this time, but it also happened this time, and it also happened this time, and each time that it happened, like it affected me this way. That's also a very useful way of going about things. And I think the very last thing that I'll say is, in terms of having the best relationship that you can, it's very heavily dependent on you trying to be the best version of yourself that you possibly can, not for your partner, but for yourself. I'm a big believer in the idea that your vibe attracts your tribe. And if you're out there trying to be the best person that you can be, not to get like a great girlfriend, or not to like be super rich, like all of those things will naturally come as a result of it, but like putting your effort towards things that you legitimately care about because they play into the core foundations of who you are as a person. That kind of energy will feed into a relationship and will build something strong that you can depend on.
Yeah, I would say my 5 things are: number one, screening very carefully. At the end of the
Mm,
day, the vast majority of girls are not cut out to be in a relationship with you. They might be cut out to be in a relationship with someone else, but they're not cut out. They're not fully 100% compatible with you. And that means taking your time, not rushing into a relationship,
yeah.
because you can't really screen someone in one day completely. Number two, good communication. I think that's very, very important. And that ties into my third point, which is avoid building resentment. Sometimes when you don't
Yeah.
communicate, resentment builds. The more resentment that builds, the more baggage you have in the relationship. And yeah, when you get to a certain point of resentment, it's like there's 3 things: there's you, there's her, and then there's the relationship. They're almost like
Hmm.
separate entities.
Yeah.
And there could be a lot of resentment in that relationship, and that's not going to be a good thing. And number four, great sex. I think it's crucial. If you ain't fucking the shit out of your girl, that's going to be a problem. And like you said, strong boundaries. I think that's also important. You know, but yeah, I would say those are like my 5 things. I think if you do those 5 things well, I think you have a pretty good shot of being in a solid relationship. But most people
Abs-
don't do
yeah.
this.
Absolutely. I mean, I have a friend out here, just a girlfriend who's one of the locals, and she just went on a Bumble date the other day, and like she came back like after 24 hours because she spent like 24 hours with this guy, and she was like, "Yeah, oh my god, it was so great," and we were like, "Oh yeah, well, like what happened?" She was like, "Well, obviously like the sex was great, but like on top of that, he told me he loved me and that he was only going to be here in Bali for." Until like July 4th, but that he was like thinking about maybe staying longer, like in order for like to be with me or whatever. And I was like, bro, run. Who is this guy? This guy's like literally insane. Don't do it. Just because again, like if you're moving into something too quickly,
Yeah,
it's an indication that you don't have anything else going on. And as a result, and if you don't have anything else going on, that is an indication of the type of person you are out in the world. So it's just like I didn't push her too hard about it just because she's a young girl. I'm not gonna like shit on her parade necessarily, but yeah, moving into things too quickly is number one indication that, at least to me, that there's something that's not quite right about the situation.
yeah. I would say one more thing is looking at the quality of her relationships with her family and friends.
Mm,
If she doesn't have any friends, and she is not doesn't talk to her family without like a valid explanation of why. That's sus, right? Like, or she can't maintain a friendship. She's jumping friendships every like
yeah.
3 months. That's weird, right? Like, yeah, I mean, obviously, like the girl could have a bad upbringing. Her parents could be abusive, but assuming that's not the case, assuming like there's just like, yeah, whatever, I told them to fuck off, or yeah, I just every friend I have is less than a year old. That's another thing that I personally look at, is like her relationships with other people, because they're going to be reflective of her relationships with you. Okay, so here we have a comment. I really like Prophet's idea of people consuming content of self-improvement as their form of dopamine, and now they're hooked on mental masturbation. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just going to be what I said earlier. Taking action is always going to trump becoming an intellectualite about any given topic. This is a very Nietzschean idea. In fact, in terms of like the way that Nietzsche wanted people to consume his content, it wasn't to go and become like scholars of Nietzsche. Like the purpose of the literature was to go out into the world and fucking take action, because like that's how things are built. That's how society comes together. It's not created in a university, in academia. It's created out in the world by people who are taking action. So
Yeah, for sure. Here's another question: how old is Anti-Prophet?
good question. I just turned 31 this year.
Oh, okay. You're slightly younger than me. I'm coming up on 34 in about 6 months.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah. Question: does he think looks or social skills is more important when it comes to attracting women?
Uh,
Constant question on my channel. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. Social skills, 100%. Like the amount of like knockout women, like for example, here in Bali, the amount of knockout women that I see here in Bali walking around with absolute trolls of men is astounding. And I think the immediate knee jerk reaction that people think to themselves is like, oh, well, that guy's just probably rich. And that the couples that I've had the opportunity to kind of like meet and sort of get to know that have the dynamic that I just described in terms of their looks, it's that is the case sometimes, but sometimes it's not either. I think that, like, people like women are really like invested in especially if they're looking for something long term, investing in a situation which will set them up for as much success that as they feel like they deserve in their points of in that point of their life. And that's a big statement that I don't really want to get into because I don't think we have time. But yeah, it's certainly not just looks. And I'll add one more thing to that. This also has a lot to do with different cultures as well. My girlfriend was telling me in Russia, um, there are a lot more women than there are men, and as a result, like, there are a lot of situations in Russia where the men can just kind of be like not super good looking, not bring a lot to the table, but they'll just be covered in women from like the beginning of their lives to the day they die, just because they're women are really wanting to get with men, and it's still a relatively traditionalist society. So I think that's a lot different from even how the West is working right now, just because obviously we have the dynamics that we have. So it depends on where you go, but I'd say overall, social skills are much more important than looks.
Yeah, long drawn out wars definitely help increase the male to female ratio. That is for sure. Did you already ask him if it's easier to get laid in Bali because he's from the U.S.? I'm assuming the answer is yes, but what's your camera's cutting out?
No, actually, it's not. I would say that it's easier to get laid in Bali just because everyone here is a little bit more relaxed. I mean, there isn't like a fucking social agenda being pushed into everyone's subconscious that they use to interact with everyone out in the world. Europeans, again, Russians, people from Japan and Thailand, like, just coming here to like hang out and visit. Like, it's an island at the end of the day, and everyone's like a lot more relaxed. Which I think plays to everyone's benefit. I think maybe one way that would potentially be a possibility that you would have an easier time getting laid just by virtue of being from the US is if you were looking to date like local women who had like local ties and local families and that kind of thing. But that, again, I just don't really run with a lot of people like that. And I think most people who come here, again, are looking to date digital nomads rather than locals.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah. So one thing I've heard about in the U.S. is that Indonesia passed some law that's going to forbid having sex between
Yeah.
people who are not married. How serious is all that?
So the governor of Bali actually issued a statement saying that this would not affect tourists because the only person that can really report you to the authorities is a family member or a family member of, your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. So if you're in a hotel with like your girlfriend that you're not married to and you're having sex like that, like, no one at the hotel is actually like legally allowed to report you.
Okay, so it won't really affect any white people who are visiting
Mm.
Bali, basically.
And that maybe something like that would be a little bit different in Jakarta. For example, I've heard, I don't know if this is the case, but I've heard that getting a hotel in Jakarta with like someone that you're not married to can be difficult in certain parts of the city, just because, again, Islam is a very strong force over there. But that also could be a tall tale. I'm not entirely sure if that's 100% fact.
Okay, interesting. Anti-Prophet favorite books or even specific YouTube videos or instruction. I think you mentioned one of your favorite books. Do you have any other books you want to mention?
Yeah, sure. So Beyond Good and Evil, you want to rip your psyche open, do that one. Beyond Good and Evil by Nietzsche. The Undiscovered Self and Ion, two different books by Carl Jung. The Red Book, if you want to get really crazy, by Carl Jung. In terms of like practical knowledge, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Dr. Gabor Mate is a really, really great book because, again, it focuses on addiction, but the way that Mate frames addiction is not so much in the realm of just alcoholism or heroin use or anything crazy like that. He's even kind of extending the the definition to just things that basically anything that we do to use the external world to quell internal emotions that we're having difficulty dealing with by ourselves. And for me, sort of changing the conversation around addiction in that way was very useful because it caused me to kind of take a look at different ways that I was using to cope with internal stress, and to kind of think about doing something different as a result. So that was very useful. And then, yeah, that's probably a pretty good list.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's do one last question. I think this is a good one. Anti-Prophet, thoughts on maximizing your sexual market value to find your true potential versus focusing on finding someone you're compatible with, regardless of attraction. Blue pillars hate the first for some reason.
Sure. So again, I think this gets back to what I was saying a few minutes ago in terms of becoming the best version of yourself that you can be for you. I don't think even framing this in such a way where it has to do with sexual market value is the optimal route. Just because, again, I'm a big believer that if you set your life up in such a way where you're making great money, you're going to the gym, you are consuming great literature, you're having great food with like great friends and having like great sex or whatever, you're going to end up attracting the tribe that you want to be around. And that's going to include women. I think that by doing all of those things, like if there's anything that women can pick up on a subconscious level, it's like being around a guy who knows who he is, has strong ethics and values, and has his life together. And that's I think in a lot of ways the most attractive thing to a woman who is well put together on her end. Yeah, you have women out there who are gold diggers and only want men for the resources rather than like what they would actually bring to the table in terms of fidelity and loyalty or whatever. But ultimately, you don't want to be around those people. And those people are, I wouldn't even say are the majority. Those types of women in the world are not the majority. It's you're most of the time just dealing with regular people with regular problems. And as a result, being the best version you can be for you in order to attract that kind of person is what I would say.
Yeah, let's do one last question because I thought this was a good one. Anti-Prophet, do you see yourself as a leader in a relationship, or do you treat your girlfriend as an equal?
I see myself as a leader. I at the end, like, and this is very specific to this type of relationship that I have, and I think it also has to do with the fact that she's from Russia, but like she wants someone who is like strong and can lead and can kind of be like, okay, this is like where we're going. And for me, that's like very gratifying because like it allows me to sort of exercise like my masculine energy, and to go out into the world and essentially like kill something and bring it back to the camp. Like that's a very gratifying feeling for me. And I'm sure there's a certain element that might change in the event that I was in a relationship with someone back in the US, just because I think a lot of people are looking for equality. But I think to a certain degree, I can't really put this into words as of yet, but I think, there's something percolating in the back of my mind that kind of says something to the effect that, relationships aren't meant to be 50-50. I think, certain partners need to carry more of the weight in certain parts of the relationship. And that's what makes a really great relationship last for a long time, because everyone goes through different seasons of life. And, sometimes someone needs to take more of the responsibility than others just because shit hits the fan in someone's life. But I think overall being the kind of man that a woman can count on to take charge and to kind of lead both of you into the future in a way that's responsible, ethical, and exciting for both parties is at least to me more gratifying than being just equal.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, man, I thought this was a really good discussion. It's interesting to learn that you're familiar with my content. Yeah, I really had no idea. And yeah, my it was like I was telling you earlier. I think we were having the tech issues. It was my marketing guy that mentioned you to me. I think he's a fan of your channel. So yeah, I will thank him for that. Thank you, Mikhail.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. And yeah, man, I thought it was a good discussion. Do you want to plug your channel and your TikTok and whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can be found on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Anti.Prophet. That is prophet as in religious prophet rather than capitalism prophet, but don't view me as your prophet.
Okay. Cool, man. But yeah, I enjoyed this discussion. Yeah, let's stay in touch, man. Maybe we'll do another one in the near future.
All right. That sounds great. Thanks so much for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
For sure, buddy. Take care. All right, guys. We'll see y'all next time.